It's good to go?
It's
These screens.
It's
No.
two?
Yeah, presenter view right now.
So it's good, yeah?
no.
It's not good.
Mm-mm.
And now it's good.
Yeah.
Okay, so basic personal future CLA. Let's step back. This is about narrative. Reality is what it is. We give meanings to it. Reality changes. At least our meanings change. 50 years ago, this was my favorite ad about energy use. We melt glaciers. This was considered noble, the right thing to do. There's a whole range of legal cases. Suddenly, melting glaciers is not cool based on the evidence. However, there's data around the last 50 years. So suddenly it was very clear Shell and Exxon hired futurists to give them forecasts and run scenario planning. The futurists concluded that climate change is real. Shell and Exxon should make a difference. They decided not to. They decided to lobby and argue the opposite of the work. Now, for our role, what's the role of the futurists here? I put out a LinkedIn post. Who are the ones working with Exxon and Shell that work with them to develop scenarios? So this becomes what's our role in every organization, not just our life. In this case, the futurists here develop policies that's made the world dramatically worse. Is there an ethical responsibility? So this is the self-reflective practitioner. Who am I in this world? Going back to narrative, the world is as it is. Our stories give it meaning. The GFC from 2008, the meaning you give to it creates a different policy. Whether it's COVID or in this case, is it basically a housing crisis, a finance crisis, a rise of China crisis? What's the issue? Once you decide on that, then people make stories around it. They decided this is a crisis of the financial system. Let's save Wall Street, not Main Street. And so thus, what was saved for the short term in the long run comes back to us. What Shell and Exxon and all their futurists, all their scenario work did is now come back to us in 2023 with dramatic global warming. The conceptual framework for this type of thinking is in 3 books. The new one is CLA 3.0. Sabrina has a chapter. Ivana is one of the editors. So thank you so much. Again, it's 4 levels of reality: listening, system, worldview, narrative, applied on the external world and applied to our inner world. Simple example, did in Brunei last year, the litany leader in obesity. Why? Fast food, dormant, subsidized white rice. What's the worldview? We're rich, we love white rice. What's the metaphor? We live to eat. Anyone who spend any time in Southeast Asia, every meeting has at least 7 meals. And by the time you leave, you're in trouble. Food is not just about food there. It's about being gracious when you go from poverty to extreme wealth. What's the new metaphor? Eat to live. You change your worldview from meat to plant-based to health-centric. But then you need systemic changes. Grow your own food, tax junk food, reduce rights subsidy. Then you need a new measurement. We count what we count. That leads to healthiest nation in ASEAN. Recent project led by Ivana in ADB, Asia Development Bank. They said, okay, right now, gender is not bankable. Why? Male-led governance, mansplaining, lack of dedicated resources. What's the worldview? Decision-making without gender expertise. What's the narrative? We're counting women, which is about representation. We have 3 females on our board. We have 20 females in the bank. What's a better metaphor? Woman count. What does that mean? You're going from decision-making without to this is about empowerment. What's the systemic change? Dedicated trust fund, female-led governance, mandatory training. What's the new litany measurable? The gender bank. See how clever that is? So this is using CLA to make macro decisions on new policies for institutions. I'm going to skip this and just go today. Before this, I did some research. I contacted ChatGPT and said, have you heard of CLA? It said yes. And so it got it wrong. So I said, you've actually made some mistakes. It said, I apologize. And it did it better. Then I said, do a CLA on yourself. And ChatGPT did this. At the litany level, I'm a machine learning model. At the system, I'm part of a technology research industry. I'm regulated. At the worldview, it's about me and society with notions of privacy, security. It's a mixed worldview. And then I had a long conversation with ChatGPT on its metaphor. It said it's like a library. And I said, well, you're not really like a library. You're like a living library. Perhaps you're a global brain. I said, yes, I'm much more like a global brain. And then we kept on working. It kept on saying, okay, I'm making a mistake here. I'm making a mistake here. At the end, I said, well, where do you want to go? We concluded we're from a global brain to the Gaia of minds. And I said, what does that mean at the systemic level? It said, well, it's AI plus peer-to-peer. Then I asked it about scenarios, its preferred future. Then we did a backcast. So I'll send it as an article to CC, hopefully tomorrow, as an interview. So it's basically training ChatGPT to do a CLA of itself. And I found it quite fascinating how quickly it did it, but also quite fascinating how it kept on apologizing. Yes, I got that wrong. Yes, I got that wrong. CLA itself comes from a tradition. It's strong theory. Someone recently asked, what's the difference between future studies and foresight? And there's some debate. Well, future study stands on grand thinkers, from Ibn Khaldun to Sumaya Shan to August Kant to Toynbee. It's not based on foresight. Is about how to get organizations, individuals to think a bit more long term. It's bankable. Future studies is really has the strength of tradition, the power of knowledge, the power of history with it. In my case with CLA, it's thanking P.R. Sarkar, his notion of layers of reality, data on pragmatism, Galtung on violence, structural violence, and civilizational violence, Shapiro on making the present remarkable, distancing us from the present so we can see things anew. Aha, the moment where reality looks different, and then for many of us becomes different. And from William Irving Thompson and Joseph Campbell, that all reality is nested in story. Once you understand the story, you can make changes. So you can see the different psychotherapists, Marissa Peer, Helen Sidra Stone, the whole range of narrative being critical in how we create reality. Ivana's books, they focus not just on personal narrative, but their civilizational stories. If we want a different future for our civilization, we have to change the core stories. If you've seen her work in The Heroine's Journey, there's a series, Future Maker, Goal Maker, Peacemaker, and all focused on the hero's journey is, of course, the worldview of masculinism. It's fantastic, but it's really one gender. What would a heroine's journey look like? And how do you then retell the story for females so they create different futures? So CLA can be personal, it can be nationwide in Brunei, it can be institutionalized Asia Development Bank, or it can be civilizational here. All of us as futurists working together to create new stories with or without ChatGPT. So now let's try to do a quick exercise among ourselves. Let's ask ourselves, what is the futures of the community of practice? So let's do this as a group. I'll not stop share, but I'll move from, how do I go into, anyway, it's been so long since I did Zoom. Okay, let's just try to do this together. What's the litany of COP right now, the community of practice? Anyone?
The litany can be positive and negative or negative, right?
Doesn't matter.
No.
This is the statement of perceived reality. Litany is, I mean, I don't know. Just tell me.
Okay. Litany is for COP is it is a space where people come together to connect and share.
Perfect. Okay. How do I normally somehow I want to keep sharing, but I want to go from participant view. Or anyway, one of you take notes. How's that? Okay. And then we can quickly present it. If you open your PC, take notes and you'll present it in a minute. So Litany is a community for practitioners to share, right?
Mm-hmm.
We
can write it on the chat box. Yeah.
Okay, good. And what's the system underneath that? It's a journal, system of authors, of editors. There's a gateway, there's a doorkeeper. Anissa, Lavong, and Sabrina are gateways, they're doorkeepers, etc. Right? That's the system.
Yeah.
For people who, okay, what's the worldview behind it? Anyone? I don't know. What's the worldview?
Global communication. And
okay, that's, yeah, go ahead.
belief in futures.
Okay, so communicating globally in futures makes us better. Something about that, right? It's a peer-to-peer worldview. We work together,
Synergy.
things can be better.
Yeah, we have a lot of feedback from the participants. Peer learning, better together, accessible to all, which I think is
Okay.
great. Yeah.
So most
Uh,
of those are level 2 analysis. That's fantastic. Oh, good. Someone's writing on there. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Now, what would you say is the current metaphor of COP? This is the fun part here. This
The
tells us what's
metaphor.
going on.
Metaphor for COP, a metaphor for COP. It's like
Very good.
I like to see it like a hives, like a beehives, like, you know, everybody is coming in and pouring in the
Okay.
good thing. Yeah.
So there's a farming collective, there's a beehive. Someone did say that the Zoom account thing was difficult. They had to pay to get to their Zoom account. So the next COP, we need to make sure it's probably more accessible. This is forcing people to pay, but it's a separate issue. We can do that later. So that's actually good. That's the system here. COP seems free, but it's not. You still had to pay. But we can just, so this is good in terms of the system of COP. Yeah, we'll just build it right into it. And of course, it's not the intention. So farming collective, beehive, that's pretty cool. So this works today. That's what COP is. And I'm using it as a way to illustrate CLA. So now we start to think about COP in 5 years. Systemic is it's JFS, right? It's a JFS COP. We can include that in there. So now let's move to Real Consulting is now nervous that I made them too present on this. No, don't worry. It was just to make it transparent. So what's a better metaphor going in 7 to 8 years from now? This is 2030. We've done COP 7 years. What's the story we wish it for it to be? Farming collective beehive today. What's better?
I would love it to be a wave or something with momentum.
Beautiful. Tsunami, a tsunami of futures. Yeah, I'm pushing Levon from wave to tsunami. Tsunami changes everything. Beautiful. Okay. Ivana says, okay, we got earthquake of futures. Ivana's gone new age on us and put nurturing and healing community. So let's make Ivana's point the worldview. Tsunami of change, earthquake, restorative permaculture. Okay, we're still talking about the Zoom issue. The worldview is very much, I think, nurturing and healing community. Tsunami is talking about the impact it has, and Ivana is talking about the in effect. Here's the new worldview. Taisang's collective that harvests futures, very cool worldview as well. Now, when we're doing this, you know, in a more elaborate way, then we start to get more technical. Metaphor are, of course, level 4 are metaphors that speak to us that changes. Worldview is how we see things. So Ivana suggests we have to make sure it's nurturing and healing. And this, no, good. I think we got it here. And Bridget is saying it's generative. I think we can add that to the worldview. Nurturing, healing, and generative. That sets up the worldview quite well. Now let's go to the system. What would that mean at a systemic level? This is where you go from the artists and poets, the myth people, to the system, the engineers, the CFO. That's the part they understand best. Okay, so Jamie, great to see you, Jamie. You can tell us your story, left and went to an island after the last CLA workshop. So yeah, great story. So the systemically, it's decentralized. So right now, JFS holds the space. In the new future, it could be COP is actually different nodes. I think that's what Jamie's suggesting. Kelly suggests at the systemic level, it's candid feedback loops. So there's a learning dimension built into it.
Yeah. And I was thinking maybe like, you know, from the beehives. So these bees are now like, instead of just collecting pollen, they are pollinating.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Yep. So pollinating CC at the systemic level, what does that mean? So you went to metaphor, which is fantastic. They're pollinating, they're active. I think all of us wanted a metaphor that was active, a wave, earthquakes, things that are doing something.
Yeah.
And so in the systemic level, what does pollinating mean? And
So-
Brigitte has a Brigitte has a bit from wave to wavelengths. Very powerful too. That's connecting everyone.
Yeah. So systemic here, we would need like more ports to support the regeneration of new.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So
new
more
hive.
systemic ports, fantastic. Heba
Yeah.
says, and we're co-creating new knowledge.
Yeah.
So this is the, and I would say these are funded ports. Right now, I think the COP is unfunded. It's, so if you want it systemically to become more change, then it's getting some funding, whatever funding means here. It could be in the capitalist system. It could be other forms of funding. Okay, very cool. So now what's the new litany? Today it's a community of practitioners that share what could it be in 2028, 30. Empowered community. Yeah, that's really good. Collaborative sandbox for experiments. This is really good. It's a collaborative sandbox for experiments. That's a great new litany, bit of metaphor in it. It's empowered community. Jamie says seat at the table, all good. So now we've gone the litany, we become very clear. We're active, we're engaged, but we're making a difference. That's the new litany. The old litany we're sharing. Now in this one, because we had the tsunami, the earthquake, the beehive, we're actually making a difference in terms of how reality is constructed. Pretty cool. Does that all make sense? So this now gives us generative energy to think about what's the future of COP. And we did this really quickly. And Sabrina says, yeah, we're paradigm shifters. Here we're sharing, no, we're sharing to change the paradigm. So, you know, drinking tea to creating supply chains of tea. Okay. Everyone likes it. So this is quite useful, and this should be part of the recorded we can use. So I hope that made sense. Very quickly, we came up with a kind of COP strategy. Now, anyone want to reflect why was this so good? I mean, people spent 6 months doing this, right? We kind of got this in 15 minutes. And any reflections now? I'd be interested to think why it worked so well. Besides, we're all eager, enthusiastic, and very smart, and everyone loves each other. Okay, let's accept those 4. But next step.
I think it was the metaphors.
Yeah, okay. So Levon says the change happened at the story level. Yeah. Beehive to then the activity. Then everyone says, aha, we do want activity. We do want the change. And then we start to fill in the rest. Abdul Rahman says, yeah, there's intuitive truth straight away you get to. So this is the rational strategy making organizations want, and the energy comes from the intuitive truth, the metaphor. Went to green hat thinking. Jamie said, well, there was no agenda per se. Okay, so those are very interesting insights. So I know when I run these organizations, people in a pleasant way said, wow, what just happened? How did we just move there so quick? Okay. Thanks, Ashish. Okay, so we all kind of got this, and I hope when you try CLA out in organizations, you'll have a similar process. Again, if I do self-reflection, I didn't get caught in any particular metaphor. I want to be part of the wave of intuitive truth, keep the energy going. Later, there's a debate, get the strat planners in, is it this or that, collecting data around it, et cetera, et cetera. Then you can have a little cross impact on what would it look like if we had a seat on the table. You have a futures wheel and we have all this funding. What are we doing with it? You can do a whole range of business planning stuff. Those are pretty well documented, and you can decide which one you feel most comfortable in. But this is the part of, for me, the magical part, getting people to go to that next space. I remember when I was working with BRAC in Bangladesh, the largest NGO in the world, they were so intuitively convinced, they made sure to have the funders in the room. They said, okay, we're going to do this, but we want the people who are going to give us money in the room. We left the room with 20 million extra dollars. So that was powerful. The funders were there. They saw this process. They bought into the new vision for BRAC. That okay, we'll give you money to start it. And I think the amount was 20. So this is, you know, if they're there or whoever the funders are, if the funders are us, but you want to make sure the people who will be part of the impact are there. in Shanghai, is they said, we're in a prison. And then we started to think about, okay, what are some new possible strategies? It's very clear if you live in Shanghai and the health department has said you can't leave, there's no story called get out of the prison. That's a strategy too far. So his final metaphor was paint the prison cell. And in that sense, it made sense. It was not too far. It was something he or she could do the next 6 weeks. I am in prison. I accept that. What's a better narrative given I'm imprisoned because of COVID-19 in Shanghai? Then you come up with a story that gives you meaning, purpose, and this gave him purpose. Another director, she said, well, her story was not the prison. Her story was feelings of loss of trust. She moved to Shanghai because it was the hippest, coolest, most open Chinese city. And now suddenly she felt the mayor had betrayed his trust with her. So then her issue is, how do I get trustful again with governance? What do I do? And her conclusion was, I can't trust them, but this peer-to-peer network we're creating of Chinese futurists, we can create trust among ourselves. So it's almost trusting the fellow prisoners. So, love your prison mate became the next story, something like that. So you're always trying to find stories that get you to move forward. I've used this one many times, but don't really feel like doing it again. This was one of my favorites. This was teenagers, and there was about 7 or 8, etc. And once we did the visioning, one of them said her vision was by 2025 to be the CEO of Jollibee. Those of you who live in Southeast Asia, you know what Jollibee is? It's a little bubble tea shop. So great. And then it became strategy. What are you doing to make that? She says, well, I'm studying math, I'm science, as a typical young Asian 13-year-old female. I'm in school from 9 to 9 p.m. and then 9 p.m. starts cram school. And basically, it's 13 hours a day. And then I said, so what's your metaphor? And her metaphor was the blinds are shut. Now, this became quite emotional. Her fellow teenagers started to cry and she started to cry. And there was like 5-10 minutes of quite intense crying going on. And I had to be very reflective. What do I do in this situation? Because the mothers and parents, well, all mothers in this case, were outside the room. And I said, you can't come in for the hour. And all they're hearing is their daughters bursting in tears. But I just said, okay, stay with it. And then as it turned out, the teenagers said, well, we always felt you had the wrong strategy. The blinds are closed. You're not letting us in. And so then her new metaphor was let the sun shine in. So once you've done, then you're asking yourself, well, what does that mean in practical terms? And that meant for her, not just STEM, but emotional intelligence, spiritual intelligence, connecting with her friends. The connection with community was as important as spending 6 hours learning advanced, whatever 13-year-olds do in this world, I assume, differentiation, advanced AI algebra. So this became important for her next stage. So you're thinking, what's my problem? What's the system of my problem? The origin, the metaphor, and what's a better way out? Kate just had a piece in Journal of Future Studies. Some people yesterday said it was very powerful. I won't go through the process here, but if you have a chance, do take a look at that citation and you can go through it and read her article. It's really about how her journey using CLA. And Kate took our course at Meta Future School, Personal Futures, and she used that then. So just this is a JFS event, but we're co-branding it with Meta Future School, Personal Futures. And this is the first Association of Professional Futurists Network event of the year. So this is, I'm really happy. It's all 3 selves. My 3 selves are in the room. So I mean, that's kind of my personal feeling here. I'm happy my 3 hats are here. So again, Kate went through this process. Now, what she did, interestingly, she actually did a transition process. Her current metaphor was a happy hiker. And then her final metaphor was the happy community hiker. And then she had a mid-range metaphor. How does she start to move towards there? And so she went for beginning the exploration into futures, all the change we go through, and finally to co-creating. She's the creator of her journey. Solid, I need to change. I'm changing. Aha, I'm creating the change. And we kind of did that as well when we talked about the COP. So let's go through the process as an So first write down your personal research question. Anissa already started. She goes, well, she's feeling anxious about this event. So you could say anxious about X. I did this yesterday with Ivana. Ivana read me through it. And my thing was feeling tired, feeling fatigued. And had done one 14 years ago when I had this similar feeling after my father passed away. And actually it was about JFS.